հանգստանալ, մամա ձեռ ես առնում։ Նորից եմ կրկնում, ինչ գործ ունես դու դրա հետ։
Ես պիտի Դավոյի փոխարեն վերև բարձրանայի, որ դրան ցույց տայի, որը որից հետո է։
Տպավորությունն է, որ ամբողջ ներաշխարհս քանդվում է, ոչ մի բան աչքից։
Կգնաս Ռուսաստան, հետո կբացատրեմ։ Իսկ հիմա պատրաստվի, տոմսերը տարածա, գիշերը թռիչքն է։
Պետք լինի կանի։ Ու դու էլ հետս անընդհատ կապի մեջ ես, որ ժամը ուզում եմ լինի։
Վով, ես իրա փոխարեն քեզնից ներողություն եմ խնդրում։
Պետք չի դու իրա փոխարեն ներողություն։
Ասեք տենամ ինչ կա, ինչ վիճակ կա, մանալից վիճակը։
20 years ago, Avo didn't leave this family on his own. Ivo forced him out. And the reason has nothing to do with pride and everything to do with a child nobody in this house has ever been told about. Before we get into it, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching this from today. I read every single comment that comes in, and I genuinely want to see how far this video actually reaches this time, so say hello down there. Let's go back and really look at how Ivo has behaved every single time Avo's name comes up in conversation. It's never rage. It's never the wounded fury of a man betrayed by his own brother. It's control, careful, practiced, the tone of someone managing a situation rather than reacting to one. Watch how quickly he shuts down any real discussion about what actually happened 20 years ago, how he redirects every conversation back to logistics, to money, to the present crisis, anything except the actual history between them. A man who was simply wronged by his brother talks about it eventually, especially over 2 decades, especially in private moments with people he trusts. A man who did the wronging avoids the subject entirely, because every version of that story requires him to explain choices he spent 20 years making sure nobody ever has to hear about. Now bring Olga fully into the picture, because her quiet, patient presence this season only makes sense once you stop assuming she's simply an old flame Avo is trying to win back. Watch how she carries herself, how little urgency she shows, how comfortable she seems simply existing at the edges of this family's chaos, without pushing, without demanding, without behaving like a woman desperate to rekindle a 20-year-old romance. That kind of stillness belongs to someone who already knows the ending of this story. She isn't waiting to see what happens. She's waiting for the right moment to say what she's known the entire time. In the next episode, expect Avo to make a decision that changes the entire shape of the season, choosing to finally speak, not to Ivo, not through another argument that goes nowhere, but to Davet or Manana directly, the 2 people in this family currently raw enough, awake enough, paying close enough attention to actually hear what he's saying instead of dismissing it as another one of Avo's excuses. Grief has already stripped Manana down to the essentials this season, and I believe it's exactly that rawness that makes her the person Avo finally trusts enough to tell the truth to. Now think carefully about the timeline everyone in this family has been avoiding doing the math on. 20 years ago, Avo disappeared. Around that same window, according to fragments scrapped throughout the season, a child was born. A child who spent years in hospitals in Russia, without a father, without a name that connected him publicly to this family. Every time this detail surfaces, the conversation gets redirected, minimized, buried under some other crisis demanding everyone's attention. That pattern alone should tell you this isn't a coincidence. It's protection, deliberate and consistent. And the person orchestrating it isn't Avo, it's Ivo, because Avo is the one who keeps trying to bring it up, and Ivo is the one who keeps shutting it down. Here's what I believe actually happened, based on everything this show has been carefully planting all season. Avo didn't abandon this family to chase some reckless younger relationship the way everyone has always assumed. He was pushed out because he refused to stay silent about a child Ivo wanted erased from this family's history entirely. A child born under circumstances Ivo found unacceptable, embarrassing, threatening to the image he'd spent his whole life building. Avo wanted to claim that child. Ivo wanted him gone instead, and used every resource, every connection, every ounce of the same controlling power we've watched him wield all season to make sure that happened cleanly, permanently, and quietly. Now connect this directly to Hanan's arrest, because I don't think these 2 storylines are separate anymore. If Ivo has spent 20 years perfecting the exact kind of quiet, efficient, untraceable control needed to erase a person from a family's history, then building a fast, clean, convenient criminal case against his own grandson to solve an entirely different problem isn't outside his skill set at all. It's exactly the kind of move a man like that would know how to make. What if Hanan's arrest wasn't random and wasn't orchestrated by some outside enemy the family hasn't identified yet? What if it was Ivo again, using the same cold precision, because Hanan was getting too close to a truth Ivo needed buried before Avo ever got the chance to say it out loud. Think about how urgently Ivo tried to push Hanan out of the country right before the arrest happened, insisting there was no time to explain, refusing to answer a single direct question about why. At the time, that looked like protection. Looked at through this new lens, it looks like removal. The exact same move Ivo made against Avo 20 years earlier, dressed up differently this time, but built from the same instinct. Control the person who threatens the secret, whatever the cost to them personally. Now bring Manana back into this, because her arc this season has quietly been building toward exactly this kind of revelation without anyone realizing it. A woman who just lost her own child, who said out loud that she killed her baby with her own hands, is now going to be told a story about another child, one erased, one hidden, one that an entire family conspired for 20 years to keep buried. I think this is the moment that breaks something open in Manana that has nothing to do with forgiveness and everything to do with rage. Because if she is expected to carry unbearable guilt over a loss she never chose, while this family has spent 2 decades comfortably burying a child they very deliberately chose to erase, that contradiction is going to detonate something in her that nobody in this house is prepared to witness. Now, think about David standing at the center of all of this, forced to reconcile the grandfather he's always trusted as the family's protector with a man who may have orchestrated the disappearance of a child, the exile of his own brother, and now possibly the wrongful arrest of his other brother, all to protect the same 20-year-old secret. I believe David is the one who finally confronts Ivo directly in the next episode, not with anger exactly, but with something colder. The specific kind of quiet devastation that comes from realizing the person who taught you what family means was willing to destroy pieces of that same family to keep his own reputation intact. Here's the twist I think changes everything going forward. What if the child from Russia isn't actually connected to Avo the way the family has always assumed? And what if Avo's desperation to speak now isn't about reclaiming his own child at all? It's about protecting someone else's child, because the real father was never Avo. It was Ivo himself, decades ago. And Avo has spent 20 years in exile, not because he did something shameful, but because he refused to stay quiet about what his own brother did and paid for that loyalty with everything he had left. Picture the next episode closing on Avo standing in front of Manana and David, finally saying the words he's been circling for an entire season, and watch Ivo's face in the background. Not confused, not shocked, but resigned. The expression of a man who has known this moment was always eventually coming, no matter how many years he managed to delay it. And just as Avo finishes speaking, just as the room falls into a silence too heavy for anyone to break first, Olga steps forward, holding a single folded document she's kept safe for 20 years, and says quietly, "This proves everything." Let's sit with that document for a second, because Olga didn't say, "I have proof." She said, "This proves everything." Past tense certainty, the kind of confidence that belongs to someone who has read this paper 100 times over 20 years, waiting for the exact moment it would matter most. Whatever she's holding, it isn't fresh evidence she just discovered. It's something she's been guarding, deliberately, patiently, through 2 decades of silence. And the fact that she chose this specific room, this specific moment, with Manana and David both present and raw enough to actually hear it, tells you she's been waiting for precisely this kind of audience. Now think about what that document could actually be. A birth record, a hospital form, something with names on it that Ivo spent 20 years making sure never surfaced in the same room together. If Ivo really is the biological father hiding behind Avo's exile, then whatever Olga is holding likely doesn't just name a child, it likely names him directly, in his own handwriting or his own signature, something he can't talk his way around the way he's talked his way around every accusation and every uncomfortable question all season. Watch Ivo's reaction closely in this moment, because I don't think he lunges for the document or tries to grab it away from her. I think he goes still. The same stillness we saw when that mysterious phone call came through earlier this season. The stillness of a man who has finally run out of moves. 20 years of control, 20 years of managing every crisis with money and influence and calculated silence. And none of it works against a single piece of paper held by a woman who never once asked him for anything in return for her silence, until now. Now bring David back into focus, because this is the moment his entire understanding of his grandfather collapses completely. He spent this whole season slowly losing trust in Ivo, watching him fail to show up for Manana, watching him push Hunan out of the country right before his arrest, watching him deflect every hard question about Avo's exile. But suspicion is different from proof, and proof is exactly what Olga just placed in the middle of this room. I believe David is the one who steps forward first, not to comfort Ivo, but to take that document directly from Olga's hands himself, needing to see it, needing to read it in his own eyes before he can let himself believe it. Now think about Manana in this exact moment, because her arc this season has been building towards something explosive, and I believe this is where it finally detonates. A woman carrying unbearable guilt over a child she lost through no fault beyond simple cruel chance, standing in a room learning that this family deliberately erased a child that was inconvenient, that was hidden not by tragedy but by choice, by cold, calculated decision. I don't think Manana stays quiet in this scene. I think she's the one who finally says out loud what everyone else in that room has been too careful, too controlled, too afraid to say directly to Ivo's face, that he doesn't get to call himself a family man anymore. Not after this. Now, let's bring this back around to Hunan, still sitting in that cell, still waiting on charges built from evidence assembled with unnatural speed. If Ivo really did orchestrate his arrest to remove him from Armenia before this exact truth could surface, then this document doesn't just expose a 20-year-old secret. It potentially unravels the entire case against Hunan as well, because it proves Ivo has both the motive and the demonstrated willingness to manipulate people and evidence to protect this exact secret. A defense attorney with access to this paper suddenly has an entirely new angle to work with, one that has nothing to do with Hunan's guilt or innocence regarding the accident, and everything to do with who benefits most from him being locked away and silent. Here's where I think the story goes even deeper than anyone expects. What if Avo's return this season was never actually about reconnecting with his family emotionally at all? What if it was always building toward this exact moment, orchestrated carefully alongside Olga, waiting for the right combination of crisis and vulnerability inside this house to finally deliver this proof where it would do the most damage and the most good simultaneously? Every awkward dinner, every uncomfortable conversation, every moment Avo overstayed his welcome and refused to leave despite the family's obvious discomfort may have all been calculated groundwork, positioning himself close enough to this family to make sure that when Olga finally produced this document, there would be people in the room ready to believe it. Picture the scene closing with Avo finally speaking, his voice quieter than we've ever heard it, admitting nothing outright, but no longer denying anything either, simply asking the room for a moment, one moment before everything changes permanently. And in that single moment of silence, before anyone responds, before anyone forgives or condemns him, Manana's phone rings, the hospital's number lighting up the screen, and she answers it, standing right there in the middle of the room, her face slowly draining of all color as she listens.